Thank you, Father Bauer, Father Becker, Reverend Fathers, any honored guests, Peter Strickland, and my brothers. Last summer, I had the opportunity to teach Totus Tuus for the second time. Now, if you know anything about Totus Tuus, you'll know that by the end of your last week, you're just ready to be done with it forever. So, at the beginning of that week, I had to give the final Mass announcement for the Spanish Mass in the afternoon. Figuring that the Spanish Mass would be a little bit longer than all the other Masses, which is usually the case, I showed up at the side of the chapel, side of the church, just to, see where Mass was at, about 50 minutes after Mass had started. Sure enough, when I looked in, there was Father talking in Spanish. So I was like, all right, seems like he's on the homily, I think we're good. And then I noticed that something was a little peculiar, because what he was talking about didn't really seem to be like a homily. I think I heard something about raffle tickets. And then I realized that everybody in the congregation was standing. And so slowly the waves of realization started to flood over me as I thought, oh, he's not on his homily. These are the announcements, which means it's the end of Mass, which means I should be up there giving my announcement, which means I'm late. And so by the time I'd figured this out and finally reacted, I bolted all the way around the church, through the main entrance, thrust open the double doors at the back of the church into the nave, and I was greeted with nothing else but Father saying, there's our seminarian, let's give him a second chance. Sure enough, everybody's eyes, entire congregation just turned and stared at me as I slowly, silently, and shamefully walked up the entire center aisle all the way up to the amble. On top of that, I had to give the entire announcement in Spanish. So, needless to say, I was a little embarrassed, and after very painfully stumbling through the announcement, I knew I had to apologize to Father. So after Mass, I went to the back, and I started apologizing to Father. Look, I'm sorry. And he just very gently, very calmly, genuinely forgave me. He said, no, it's okay. And then he admitted, yeah, my homily was probably pretty short because I'm learning Spanish, and so I didn't really have much to say, or rather I couldn't say very much, so don't worry about it. But then he expressed his desire, because it's like, Father, if you don't really know Spanish very well, why are you saying the Spanish Mass when you have a perfectly capable Hispanic priest who could say all the Spanish Masses, and you could just say the English Masses? That would seem to make sense. Well, then he just very gently corrected me and said, no, see, I don't want my flock to be divided. I don't want my parish to be divided. Because if I'm over here preaching at all the English Masses, and the other priest is over there always saying the Spanish Masses, it'll be like there are two different parishes, two different congregations in the same church, and there'll just be a division. And so then I realized that he was basically just sucking it up, learning Spanish, taking it the hard way for the sake of his flock, for unifying his flock. Now, this isn't the main reason why this man is the one that I would like to emulate as a priest. That same night, at the end of the teen program, we prayed night prayer. So, gathered up all the teens, brought them into the church, and once we got there, I noticed that a light was on, the light above the tabernacle. So I was like, okay, this isn't good. We left the lights on. We're going to have to make sure we don't do this again, blah, blah, blah. And then I noticed that there was a solitary figure just seated in the front pews. And when I looked a little closer, I realized that, sure enough, it was the pastor. And then I saw the look on his face. And it was just one of complete love and desire and longing as he just gazed at the tabernacle. And so as I filed all the teens into the pews, I just slowly realized more and more what I had just encountered. Because there was this man who didn't know we were coming, could have been doing anything else with his free time, and he had just come into this dark and empty church in order to be with Jesus, to be with the one he loved. Now, I could mention multiple other times where I caught him in the church alone praying, But on another note, since we had daily mass with the kids every day, he would be in the back, vested, seated, and ready to go 10 minutes before mass started each time. And he was just there praying, preparing himself for what was about to happen. And during mass, all of his actions, all of his words just seemed to speak of this profound prayer, this gentleness, this love. Indeed, his very character seemed to radiate this gentleness and this peace. And so, my brothers, this is why I hold up to you this man as the priest that I desire to emulate. And it really only took a few encounters with him to realize this. For if, as St. John Vianney says, priesthood is the love of the heart of Jesus, then where else are we to find that love and that intimacy but in prayer? Perhaps you've already heard this 1,000 times before here at SJV. But if so, let this be the first of another 1,000. Brothers, we need prayer. The local humble pastor that I encountered happened to be Father Jerome Kish of the Diocese of Joliet. But God willing, this should be all of us one day, totally enraptured with love for Jesus. This is why Father Kish stood out to me. Because when I saw him, I saw a man in love with Jesus. And brothers, what more do we need than his love? Praise be Jesus Christ.
Amen.